I apologize, y'all. Every once in a while, we have to try and have a little bit of fun here. It is 6 o'clock. We'll announce that a quorum is present, and if you would, I'll call this meeting to order, and if you join me in a word of prayer, please. Our dear Heavenly Father, Lord God, we thank you so much for the rain that you've given us. Lord, forgive us when we get tired of that and we gripe and say, enough, because we know that around here enough is not ever going to be enough. So Lord, I pray for the continuation of the rain, and I pray that you forgive us when we get impatient. Thank you so much for the many blessings you give us every night and every day. Lord, I pray a special blessing on our council as we try to come together and work for the better of our community. We try very hard, Lord, to do the right thing, and I pray that everything we do is for the best and then pleasing in your sight. Lord, I thank you so much for our military men and women who fight and die for us, to give us the rights that we enjoy in this country. Thank you so much. And Lord, most especially, I thank you for your Son, Jesus Christ, who died for the forgiveness of our sins. And it's in his name I pray. Amen. And if you join me for our Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible. Thank you all. You may be seated. At this time, we'll open the meeting up to council announcements. It's an opportunity for council members to share with the public and with each other anything they may have on their hearts or minds. Council have anything? Seeing nothing from council, I will close that part. I'll move it open to our public comments section. This is the same thing, but this is for y'all. This is an opportunity for our public to come forward, speak. Time not to exceed 3 minutes on almost anything you'd like, except personnel matters or matters that are under litigation with our attorney. Anyone from the community like to speak? Okay. Seeing none there, I will close the public comments section. We'll move on to 6.0. This is our consent agenda. This is to consider and act upon the minutes from our last meeting. Council's had an opportunity to look those over. Council have any thoughts or comments on our minutes? Not, I'd entertain a motion. I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes as written.
I'll make that motion. I'll second.
I have a motion by Councilman White, seconded by Councilman McGuire to approve the minutes. All those in favor? Passes unanimously. Thank y'all very much. Moving on to 7.1, these are a list of our public hearings. Ladies and gentlemen, please bear with us as we go through these. 7.1, notice of public hearing of the City Council of the City of Clyde, Texas to consider the advisability of the creation of a reinvestment zone, number 1, City of Clyde, Texas, for tax increment financing purpose pursuant to Chapter 311 Texas Tax Code. This, ladies and gentlemen, is an opportunity for you to speak on this particular item. Have any comments or questions, thoughts, discussions? Natalie would like to talk to us about it, so.
Hello, Mayor and Council. Thank you for having me here today. My
Yes,
name is Natalie Moore. Do I need to?
You need to do it in the agenda.
I'm sorry?
You need to do it when we do the agenda.
Oh, okay.
This is for the public that has questions about it. You don't have questions about it,
No,
right?
I don't. I'm
Yeah.
here to speak on the topic.
Right.
Well,
But we
good. Well,
have
then
an
I'll-
ordinance on it, on the agenda. That's when you'll speak.
I'll be back.
We'll bring you back then.
Okay.
All right, so for the public, do y'all have any questions or comments about this particular item? Okay, if there's no discussion on this public hearing, I'll close public hearing 7.1. We will move to 7.2. This is a notice of public hearing of the City Council of the City of Clyde, Texas to consider the advisability of the creation of reinvestment zone number 2, City of Clyde, Texas, for tax increment financing purposes pursuant to Chapter 311 Texas Tax Code. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the same thing as 1, it's just in a different location. So, and as we kind of addressed, we will be discussing this a little bit more just shortly. All right, no comments on this public hearing. I'll close public hearing 7.2. We'll move to 7.3. This is notice of public hearing on property located at being 13.14 acres, abstract 86, section 65, BBB and C, or 1300 Ross Road, Clyde, Callahan County, Texas. Request is for a rezone of property to single-family estate. The property is currently zoned as agricultural. It's 1300 Ross Road. Does anyone have a discussion about that? Okay, seeing no discussion, I will close public hearing 7.3. We'll move to 7.4. This is notice of public hearing on property located at addresses 204, 206, 208, 210, and 212 Marlin Street, Clyde, Callahan County, Texas. Request is for a rezone of property to multifamily so a triplex can be placed on each property. The property is currently zoned as single-family estate. Have anybody would like to discuss or talk about properties on Marlin Street? Okay, seeing no discussion, I will close 7.4. We'll move to 7.5. This is notice of public hearing on property located at being 16.51 acres, abstract 86, section 65, BBB and C, or 1300 Ross Road, Clyde, Callahan County, Texas. Request is for a rezone of property to single-family estate. The property is currently zoned as agricultural. Now, this is the same address y'all did here, 1300. This is just at a different entrance to that property. Yes, Jay?
The first one that you went through, the first 1,300, is 13-point-something acres there. That has now been readdressed, and it will be 200 Pleasant Lane now.
Okay, very good. So that will change to 200 Pleasant Lane. All right. Okay, anybody like to discuss this area of 1300 Ross Road? Okay, seeing no discussion, I'll close 7.5. We'll move to 7.6. This is notice of public hearing on property located being lots 5 and 6, blocks 50, original town site, Clyde, Callahan County, Texas. The request is for a preliminary replat of property into 3 lots so houses can be constructed on each lot. The property is currently zoned as single-family 2. There's not an address listed on here, but as we went and looked at, that's on the corner of South 5th and Bowie. So, anyone interested in discussing South 5th and Bowie Street? Okay, seeing no discussion, I will close 7.6. We'll move to 7.7. Notice of public hearing on property located at lots 3 and 4, Block E, Rolling Acres, 408 Oriole Street, Clyde, Callahan County, Texas. The request is for a rezone of property to manufactured home district so a manufactured home can be placed on the property. The property is currently zoned as single-family 2. Do I have anybody that would like to discuss 408 Oriole Street here in Clyde? Okay, seeing no discussion, I will close public hearing 7.7. At this time, we will move to our regular agenda. And first item is 8.1. However, Mr. Cooley, they've had a death in their family. We do pass along our condolences, and they won't be here this evening, so we will skip 8.1. And due to time constraints, we're going to move from 8.2 ahead to 8.10. So this is, and we will come back to 8.2 on the agenda item. 8.10 is to consider an act upon approving an ordinance authorizing the issuance of sale of City of Clyde, Texas General Obligation Refunding Bonds, Series 2023A, levying an annual ad valorem tax and providing for the security for and payment of said bonds, approving the official statement, providing an effective date, and enacting other provisions relating to the subject. Mr. McGuire?
So Mr. Jensen from Specialized Public Finance is going to make the presentation.
Good evening, Mayor, Council, and staff. Paul Jason with Specialized Public Finance. Hopefully it's showing up on your tablets. Thanks for moving us up. The investors and underwriters requested that. they get anxious in a volatile market, so we wanted to let them know as soon as possible when the bonds are approved. So this actually covers presentation for 8, 10, 11, and 12. They'll each need to be acted on individually, obviously, but wanted to go over the pricing results. We priced 3 bond issues, refunding the 2013 A bonds. We had to split that to a taxable portion. If you recall, when we did that 13 issue, we had to have a taxable piece due to the sales to a water supply corporation. Since 2013, the sales have continued to increase. It was the recommendation of your tax council to have more flexibility in there so you're not in violation of the IRS requirement for private use. And so what this does is it allows you the flexibility to sell water and continue on the pace that you are. So that's why we had to split it out into a taxable piece. As far as the COs, those were a $4 million issue, 30-year amortization. The transaction was rated A- by S&P. Very pleased about that. Because of that rating, Assured Guaranty insured the debt. You had to pay a small premium, but the debt has a AA rating with S&P due to insurance, and then your underlying rating is A-. The call date is 8/1/2033. That means that the bonds can be called 10 years from the sale date, and then the certificates have the same call date. We did not extend the maturities of the refunding bonds. We still have a 2043 maturity. That was the original maturity when those bonds were sold in 2013. The net present value savings is just under $300,000. The total savings is around $450,000. The industry target is around 3%, so you come in around 4.2%, and that does include selling a piece of it taxable. What that means is the taxable rate's higher. So the tax exempt rate was 4%. The taxable rate was 5.7. Those blended together was 4.3% on those bonds. And again, these rates are fixed for the life of the transaction. The COs have a 2053 maturity. The rate on those was 4.3%. Approximate debt service is around $250,000 a year. Page 3 shows the savings. It's roughly $22,000 a year. On the refunding, total savings is around $450,000. The far right column is the total savings, and then if you present value that savings back at the discount rate, you have a present value amount of $300,000. So it's obviously still an economic refunding. Page 4 is the structure of the COs. We have a small ramp up in debt until we get to about $250,000. I think our assumptions with the growth rate of the tax base is probably pretty conservative. So that's the structure of the COs. Page 5 is just the sources and uses. There was 3 issues. There was 2 pieces of the refunding, an A and a B. So we sold $7 million to essentially refund the outstanding bonds, and then we sold $4.13 million for the COs. The COs at closing will provide roughly $4 million in proceeds for the projects that we discussed at the meeting. We did the notice of intent to issue the COs. Page 6 is just an interest rate chart. That shows where rates have been since 1961. The blue line is that average. The red line is where we are today. So we are below that average. Rates have obviously gone up quite a bit, over the last year. But it's still, you look at the long-term perspective, it's still a favorable interest rate for the city. And again, it's going to be a fixed rate on both these issues. So we would recommend that you award the refunding bonds to Samco, and then also award the COs to Samco as well as the underwriter. They did a very good job. They worked with us. One of their concerns, of course, was the audit. We need to work on getting the audit done in time. We've worked diligently. I know Connie has, and you did all you could with your current auditor. But that was one of the pieces that the investors were wanting, is just have an audit done within the time frame. So that's really all I had for the transaction. Anything else, Chris, you'd like to add that I may have missed? Or
I would just add that thank you for all the hard work from your team and for the Samco team. Connie and I have been working this issue almost daily for the past 30, 40 days. We had multiple meetings with the tax attorneys. We were going back and forth about keeping all the refunding tax exempt. But when we looked at our water sales volume, the last 2 years, we were above the IRS limit, so we were forced to either self-report to the IRS that we were violating the terms of the 2013 issuance and adjust accordingly, or break out a percentage to go our taxable bonds, which gave us the flexibility to keep on producing water and selling water. When we ran the financial analysis on that, it made more sense to be able to sell water and have that flexibility than the little bit of savings on issuing roughly $1.3 million in taxable versus non-taxable. And as you saw, the interest rate splits, it put us at 4% anyway, well within where we needed to be. And at the end of the day, we're saving roughly $500,000. So it was a complete win.
Very good. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you.
Chris. Thank you very much. Council have any questions, thoughts? If not, I entertain a motion to approve the ordinance as is stated.
So moved.
I'll second it.
Have a motion by Councilman Rector, seconded by Councilman White to approve an ordinance authorizing the issuance and the sale of the City of Clyde, Texas general obligation refunding bonds. All those in favor? Thank you. It passes unanimously. 8.11, this is to consider and act upon approving an ordinance authorizing the issuance and sale of City of Clyde, Texas general obligation refunding bonds, taxable Series 2023B, levying an annual ad valorem tax and providing for the security for and payment of said bonds, approving the official statement, providing an effective date, and enacting other provisions relating to the subject. Mr. McGuire?
Again, this is the taxable piece that we just discussed.
Yeah.
And the reasons why we had to break that out, that roughly $1.5 million is taxable.
Yes.
The recommendation is council approve this as well.
Council have any questions concerning how that breaks down?
I just want to clarify, just, my accounting is kind of in thinking of like a household. So the discussion that we had earlier at our previous visit with you, we had kind of a big pie. This is the same pie, just cut into different pieces to meet the requirements, of taxes and the IRS for the city, not for the individual taxpayer that lives in Clyde.
Right.
Okay.
This is to stay in compliance with the IRS as the issuance. The way the 2013 bonds were issued, there was provisions in there that were broken out about using bond proceeds to fund public infrastructure, specifically water. In that, we were capped at a 35% by the IRS rule of we could not sell more than 35% in water sales versus private sales or the government sales, meaning the water we sell to the citizens of Clyde, the water that we sell to other government entities. So for example, Callahan County Water Supply, Eula Water Supply, they're considered private, under IRS rules, private water corporations. That is where we were running into the rub with the IRS. We are selling more than 35% to those two entities. So when we did the analysis, it was either stop selling water and cap water at 35% to stay inside the IRS rules, self-report to the IRS, take a penalty, or have the flexibility to continue to sell water, not impede the water corporations that are buying water from us and the customers they need to serve. And we broke that small portion to taxable, which the tax attorneys told us was the prudent move to make without limiting us. And when you did the financial analysis, we make more money in being able to have the flexibility to sell water than we would recoup on that $1.5 million being inside tax exempt.
So the sale of the water is more profitable for the city than the savings on any taxes.
On any taxable
And
issuance.
so when our citizens are reading about this in the newspaper, they should understand that this is not going to be a tax that shows up on any document that comes in the mail?
No, this has no impact on water rates. This was inside the funding mechanism of issuing public debt. We
Okay.
had to stay in compliance with all the IRS requirements. And like I explained, it's in the city's benefit to be able to continue to sell water to the water corporations and not limit ourselves. And now we're not encumbered by limits now because we broke out that portion.
Okay, so we're more profitable, and we are winning by reducing the interest rate that was on the 2013 agreement, and so this is just a better deal all the way.
It's a better deal all around. There's roughly 500,000 in total savings, roughly 22,000 a year for the remaining life of the bonds. And we remain with the flexibility to continue to service the water supply corporations that depend on our water for their customers as well.
Okay,
And no impact on water rates. This has nothing to do with what water costs. This is just debt issuance and staying in compliance with the IRS rules.
okay, thank you.
And I think going on what you're saying as well, both of these 810 and 811, it's not new debt to the city. This is just refinancing it, lowering the interest rate, and saving money.
These were bonds that were passed in 2013, and when we were in a refunding window. We tried to do this last year. The market rates weren't favorable at that time. And we waited again until the market came back in our direction, and the market was in our direction, and the net result is roughly $500,000 in savings.
Worthwhile.
Very good. Council, have any other thoughts, questions? All right, if not, then I would entertain a motion to approve the ordinance authorizing the issuance of sale in the city of Clyde, Texas, general obligation refunding bonds.
Make a motion, we approve the ordinance.
Second.
I have a motion by Councilman McGuire, seconded by Councilwoman Kaufman. All those in favor? Passed unanimously. Thank you very much. Moving on to 8.12. This is to consider and act upon approving an ordinance authorizing the issuance and sale of City of Clyde, Texas combination tax and surplus revenue certificates of obligation, Series 2023, levying an annual ad valorem tax and providing for the security for and payment of said certificates of obligation, providing an effective date and enacting other provisions relating to the subject. Mr. McGuire?
So this was part of the project list that we brought forward to council in the last couple of meetings. This allows us the ability to continue to work on infrastructure projects. Being able to secure this money at 4.3% is far less expensive than it would be to go bank qualified and try to take a loan from a bank for the same money. So we're at least an interest or 1.5 points below what we could get at a bank rate. The INS burden is only 11 cents. It's already captured into all the budget. So this allows us to move forward on projects that we desperately need to do with water towers, water tower repairs, vehicles, and more importantly, this gets to councils trying to upgrade the infrastructure around here, and this solves the road issue. This allows us to purchase the paving machine and the asphalt reclaimer. The value in doing that reduces the cost of $1 million a mile of paving costs down to about $120,000 in asphalt purchase per mile. And now it gives us the flexibility to get after one of your priorities as council is roads and obviously citizens' priorities to be able to do the road. And now we can put the city on a trajectory with a paving plan. We know what the worst streets are. We know where our starting point's going to be. And over the course of the next several years, we will work our way from worst to best, repave every road in the city, and then have the city on a maintenance cycle. And anytime there's work to be done, roads need to be opened for water, sewer, anything that happens, we will have the ability to go back in and completely asphalt, and we won't be left with packing in with white rock and things that we currently have to do. And there'll be no more chip sealed roads in the city. will be on asphalt roads. So this is a huge move forward for the city and money well spent.
So we'll be redoing the roads other than patching the roads?
Yes, we will completely resurface all the roads to asphalt.
And this machine is the one depicted in the Clyde Journal and on
Yes.
social media? Okay.
Very good. Council have any other questions or thoughts, comments? Okay, then I'd entertain a motion to approve the ordinance.
So moved.
I'll second.
I have a motion by Councilman Rector, seconded by Councilman White to approve the ordinance authorizing the issuance and sale of City of Clyde Texas combination tax and surplus revenue certificates of obligations. All those in favor? That passes unanimously. Thank you very much. At this time, we will move back to 8.2. 8.2 is to consider and act upon adopting an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Clyde, Texas pursuant to Chapter 311 of the Texas Tax Code, creating tax increment financing reinvestment zone number 1, City of Clyde, Texas. Now, Ms. Nally, thank you so much for being patient. Sorry about that.
That's all right. Thank you for having me again. My name is Natalie Moore. I'm with David Pettit Economic Development out of Fort Worth. I'm here to talk on this item and the next item, both covering the topic of tax increment reinvestment zones. Based on the statute, we need to cover the concept of tax increment financing, which I came maybe about a month ago to discuss that with you, but for the public as well, I'd like to just go over the mechanics of what tax increment reinvestment zones are and the financing concept, talk about proposed tax increment reinvestment zone number 1. I will refer to it as TERS number 1. And then the next steps and have time for any questions. Next slide. So this is a concept that is used throughout the state of Texas. It's a tool that incentivizes economic development within a tax increment reinvestment zone. So I mentioned that I'll refer to this as TERS number 1. I used to administer them in Fort Worth. We called them TIFs, but tax increment financing is actually the mechanism. I think of it as the verb. TERS is tax increment reinvestment zones, the noun, but a lot of times those are used interchangeably. It's governed by Tax Code Chapter 311. There's hundreds of TERSs have been created in the state of Texas. This is a tool that is used by communities great and small. We do these in the city of El Paso, the city of Grand Prairie, city of Arlington, Fort Worth, Dallas, but also smaller communities. You know that part of the reason that I was able to connect with y'all here is that we created a TERS in the city of Abilene. We've done one in Kerrville, Denton, all communities of all sizes throughout the state are using this tool. Cities alone or in partnership with other taxing units can use this tool to pay for improvements in the zone with the idea that it's going to attract new development, facilitate investment, and bring excitement and energy to a designated area. You'll notice there's some emphasis in the language here, partnership with other taxing units. It's not uncommon for the county to come and be a partner in the TERS. I would suggest that as the TERS develops, if there's a project that you think the county might need to participate in, that would be an opportunity for you to go to the county and say, this is something we'd like for you to participate in. Would you consider participating in our TERS? There are other taxing entities, obviously, that benefit from the TERS, but typically the ones that we see partnering in terms of participating in putting revenue into the fund, it's usually limited to the city and the county. This is a graph that shows what we're talking about. The number one question that we get when we enter into a community and propose to create a TERS is this a new tax? And it is not a new tax on the development. Oftentimes people get this maybe confused with public improvement districts, which public improvement districts is an additional levy on the property. This is not an additional levy on the property. The citizens will not see any change in their tax bill whatsoever. But what it does is it redirects a portion of the incremental tax generated from new development within the zone to a special fund. And so here you can see that gray horizontal box. That represents all of the tax revenue that is currently going into the general fund from the property. The year in which the zone is designated, creates a base. And so if you were to pass the creation of TERS number 1, the base value of the properties within the zone would be frozen at 2023. Any increment over that, a portion of it, we're proposing 75%, would go into the TERS fund, and then the additional 25% would go into the general fund. You might remember that I gave a math example, but let's just say for every new $100 that was generated from the property in tax revenue, 75 of those dollars would go into the TERS fund to be spent within the zone, and 25 would go into the general fund. Now, if the property was originally already generating $100, then that $100 would continue to go into the general fund. So whatever the city's getting from the property today, they'll continue to get. It's only additional incremental tax revenue that we're talking about potentially redirecting into the TERS. Why would we do this? Why would we create a TERS? One of the number one reasons that it makes it a good time to create a TERS is when private development activity is expected to occur within a designated area. A TERS is not necessarily just a if you build it, they will come type of scenario. If you just draw a TERS boundary around a vacant piece of land and just say, okay, well now developers are gonna come knocking down our door, that's not necessarily the case. However, you have a unique situation here where you have the Catalyst project in your stadium that's being built, or your sports complex, excuse me. And there's already developers interested in the property. And so once you know that there's going to be private development interest or occurring within or around the zone, it's a great time because the value at this time is low. So right now it's 2023. It's a great time to kind of hit that value, and then all the increment that's generated moving forward, you'll have some money to quote unquote play with. It allows you to leverage revenues from the taxable property within the TERS to generate a larger increment. I think that's always important to remember, is that we're not just trying to allow development to occur as it naturally would, we're trying to accelerate it and amplify it. That's really the goal here, is to use these tax incentives in order to get more than you would get otherwise. A TERS can pay for infrastructure, public improvements, economic development programs, which are Chapter 380 grants that are allowed within the TERS, and other projects benefiting the zone. So how do you create a TERS? Chapter 311, the statute that governs tax increment reinvestment zones, outlines various procedures for creating and amending a TERS. As two main documents: the creation ordinance, which is being presented to you for your consideration tonight, and then there's the TERS project and financing plan. The creation ordinance, and you talked about PI earlier today, what I think of it is the creation ordinance establishes the mechanism. It creates the pie. It's not giving out any pieces of the pie yet. It's setting up the pie. So it sets the boundary, the term, the TERS board, city participation level, and then it gives that preliminary project and financing plan, which is attached as Exhibit C to the ordinance that you're considering today. Once the TERS has been created, then at a later date, we'll come back with a final project and financing plan. The TERS board would have to approve the plan, and then City Council would have to adopt the plan by a separate ordinance. So the TERS boundaries that we're proposing, these are very similar to what we presented when we came here, I believe, in May. You can see I-20 is mostly to the north of the site, with 65 acres held by half-acre holdings to the north of it. This property is within the city limits and the city ETJ. Next slide. It's approximately 295 acres, and again, the purpose of this TERS would be to encourage private development that will yield additional tax revenue to all the taxing jurisdictions. So part of the preliminary project and financing plan, and part of the exercise that we were hired to do, is to work with Chris and take his knowledge of the site, and then also taking into account the hotel market feasibility study that y'all had completed, and then also taking into account what we know that the market will withstand for development. We put together what we think is the anticipated development that could occur within the TERS over the term of the TERS. So we are proposing 30 years. You can see here that we project out from 2025 through 2032. This is a projection. This is what David, my boss, calls crystal balling. There's no level of necessarily certainty in terms of what, we're not guaranteeing that this is going to occur, but this is based on what we know today, based on market realities. We believe that this is how the property within those boundaries could potentially develop. You'll see that there's a hotel, a 100-room hotel, at a taxable value of $110,000 per room. One thing I do want to note here is that when we talk about taxable values and the potential impact that the development could have on the TERS fund, we focus on what we believe the taxable value will come online on the tax rolls, not necessarily what the developer will spend to build. And so, for example, for the hotel, the comp that tax comparable that I pulled, we do have to move to the neighboring county because Callahan County doesn't have a lot of hotels that were recently built. But in Abilene, the Home 2 Suites was built in 2019, and that's on the tax rolls in their county at $109,000 per room. So I felt comfortable projecting that if a hotel were to be built in Callahan County, that it would come online at $110,000 per room. So that's how we arrive at those figures. Likewise with the retail, Clyde's McDonald's was built in 2013. That's the most recent comp that I could find for like a quick service retail. That came online at $213 a square foot. The Starbucks in Abilene came on at $231. That's how we landed at the $225 projection of the retail. So we try to be conservative. We try to be realistic. Even though we're crystal balling, it's not complete nonsense. We're not trying to just do garbage in, garbage out. So all that to say, based on our projections of 2 hotel projects and then retail pad sites, you'll notice that we have 2,500 square foot retail sites and then also 3,500. That's assuming that there's going to be a mix of quick service retail and potentially sit-down restaurants. We did have a Buffalo Wild Wings in our comp set as well. Taking all that into account, we believe that there could be up to $30 million worth of taxable value added within the TERS boundaries. I honestly think that this was still a little conservative. I do think that, one big project could blow that out of the water, but just to be conservative in terms of what we believe and what we know today. So that $30 million of taxable value, once we add, that's our input into the model. Then we have our assumptions proposing that the city of Clyde would contribute 75% of the real property increment. So out of that tax revenue that $30 million would generate, we're gonna put 75% of the city's portion of that into the TIF fund above that 2023 base for 30 years, which means that the last year would be December 31, 2053. We're showing that green column there on the left, that $30 million of taxable value over the 30 years would generate $35 million in tax revenue to all the different taxing entities. I do want to point out that if you do the quick math, 75% of the 13 million I'm showing for the city of Clyde is not 6.3. The reason that number is greater, the city of Clyde does take into account your sales tax, so it's not just property tax that's taking into account. The participation is limited to real property tax. So you're only putting the real property tax 75% into the TIF fund, which means that yes, you're giving up or foregoing perhaps 75% of the real property increment going into the TIF fund, but 100% of your new sales tax would go to the general fund. That's a benefit that the community is getting, and not to speak of the portion that also goes to your EDC. So we're not touching that, if you will, for the TERS fund. All of that would just go into the general fund. Also, Callahan County, Clyde ISD, you can see the ISD there. Out of that 35 million, 14 million of that would be going to the ISD, so it would be a huge net benefit to your ISD. A total net benefit to all the taxing entities of just over 28 million. So if you see that participation is 6.3, what does that mean? What are we talking about, 6.3 million? That means 6.3 million could potentially go into the TERS fund. And then, next slide. So if that 30 million comes to fruition and $6.3 million goes into the TERS fund, what are you supposed to do with it? Well, One of the things that I like to emphasize is that just because your property is within a TERS does not mean that you get any TERS money by right. The developer or the city or whoever is asking for an allocation of those funds, a piece of the pie, if you will, they have to first go to the TERS board and then city council to ask for that money to either be reimbursed or pledged to their project. So how does the TERS board and city council make those decisions? How do they make those allocations? It has to align with your city strategic plan, your vision for the city, but then also the request should fall in one of these buckets of funds. So you can see they're very broad: water, facilities and improvements, sanitary sewer, facilities, stormwater, transit parking, street and intersection, open space, economic development grants. That's kind of the catch-all. Does it stimulate the economy? Do we want to give this project money? And administrative costs. They're meant to be fluid, they're meant to be flexible. Cost savings from one line item can be applied to another. So if you're at the TERS board and you say, we want to pay for a parking garage, I don't know, let's just say you want to pay for a parking garage and we only have 3% because we didn't anticipate that that was going to be something. You as the TERS board have the discretion to say, okay, well, I understand that we only put 3%, but we want to put 15%. And you don't have to do an amendment to the plan. You have that discretion as long as it's a category listed here. This is really just set to be a guide, but not meant to be restrictive. So the next steps, today is June 13th. We're asking City Council to consider the creation ordinance, which again just establishes the boundaries, the term, which would be 30 years if you approve the ordinance as it stands. The TERS board, which is yourselves, we have selected that you all would be the TERS board. City participation, which would be that 75%, and then the preliminary project and financing plan. If the TERS were to be created today, we would ask to come back on July 11th with the final project and financing plan, which would have those categories that I listed, and then it would need to be approved by the TERS board and city council. There would be a separate ordinance to be considered that day. I know I said a lot, so I will take any questions you may have.
Have any questions for Natalie?
So this is a 30-year TERS zone, so hopefully after 30 years, everything is developed, and I'm assuming we have to use the money generated by the TERS within that 30 years, is that?
You don't, actually. So if you decide that you don't like any of the projects that have come forward and you just don't want to use this tool anymore, if you have money in the fund but no outstanding obligations, you can terminate the TERS and the money will be returned to the entities along the lines of how it was given. So if it's just the city, it would just all go back to the city. So there's no obligation to use the funds if there's no projects that you don't like. It's not, so basically, just because the money goes into the TERS fund doesn't mean that now it's gone forever. If you decide you could, 5 years in, this tool isn't working for us, we don't like it, you can terminate the TERS, no harm, no foul. Has a lot of flexibility.
It's not a use it or lose it thing.
Right.
Yeah.
But then after the 30 years, then whatever
All the value
all
goes
the
back
value
to the
goes
city.
back.
Yes, that's right. So it should be I mean, in some communities, and this is a policy decision for some cities decide that they really like the tool and they just extend the TERS for another 10 years, or they might decide to expand the boundaries or however that might be, but.
So new development comes into the TERS zone, they're gonna say, okay, hey, we're gonna put in some infrastructure, but we need you to commit money from the TERS when it becomes available back to us, so that it basically covers the cost of that.
That's right, and they're taking the risk there because if they don't go vertical, there's no money to be received.
Right.
And so the onus is on them to generate the tax revenue to reimburse them.
And this gives us, by creating that, this gives us that ability to have that 75%, have that money financing to be able to help.
Well, it takes the burden off of us putting
Yeah.
infrastructure in. They kind of put it in up front, and then through the TERS get reimbursed. But then it becomes our
Yeah, 'cause
infrastructure as they're putting it in.
The way we stand right now, if somebody comes to the city and wants to develop something right now, but they want certain asks, they want certain, help, financial or whatever, then we're looking at, okay, well, how do we come up with that money? This allows us to create where that money then comes from.
I think it's important to recognize that 100% of zero is still zero,
Yeah.
and 25% is 25%.
Yeah.
And I can tell you that in TERS number 1, it's already spurred a property purchase that's been back and forth, and this was the catalyst event to get a real estate transaction closed that gets to all the projects that we're trying to do inside that TERS.
Very good.
So, I mean, the property owner and the developer saw what the city was doing, and that was the final piece. They were waiting to commit before they started committing millions of dollars. They wanted to see that the city was serious about the development process.
Very good.
Would you speak again to the TERS board? Because I even wrote down the question because we have the council, we have the EDC, and you said you all are the TERS board. As the council, we're the TERS board?
That's right. So the ordinance, as it stands right now, has that the TERS board will be made up of the members of council.
Okay.
And there's a couple of reasons that we do that, is at the end of the day, the city council really makes the decision, so, because they have to approve it. The TERS board is kind of like is a recommending body, truthfully. And it just allows for a more streamlined process in terms of what some of the best practices that we've seen is actually having the TERS board meetings within the city council meeting. So we'll recess, go into a TERS board meeting, go back into city council, and it just streamlines the process in terms of that. However, that's not to say, I don't think it was a city council member, but it still continues to blow my mind that sometimes people will flip between the meetings. So somebody will approve something in a city, as a TERS board member, and then deny it as a city council member. I mean, I've only seen that once, and it still continues to blow my mind. I'm like, I don't know,
So,
you know, what you did,
so
but.
a city our size is better just to have the council as the
Yeah,
board.
that's what we've seen has been the easiest and cleanest way to get things accomplished in a timely manner. Allows for easy scheduling as well.
Right.
All right, council have any other questions? Any thoughts?
So we need to do,
We'll take action on this one,
TERS number 2.
and then we'll ask Ms. Natalie to repeat everything she just said all over again.
I'll give an abbreviation.
Okay, so at this point then, with all the information the council's been given and the questions that have been asked and answered, I would entertain a motion to, I had it wrote down right here, to adopt the ordinance as we just discussed, creating TERS number 1.
make the motion, we adopt the ordinance to create TERS zone number 1.
Second.
I have a motion by Councilman McGuire, seconded by Councilwoman Kaufman. All those in favor? Passed unanimously. Thank you very much. Moving on to 8.3, and for the citizens, real quick, Ms. Natalie will answer any questions again, but we're gonna say the same thing all over again for TERS number 2. We can discuss, it's just a different area that we're looking at creating this. So it's all the same information, it's all the exact same stuff that we talked about, but if you can look at the maps on here, this is, you can see what area, where we're looking at for TERS number 2. All right.
I'll keep it brief. It's the same mechanism. It's the same statute that governs it, Chapter 311. So you can see here, this, one of the great things about TERSs is that they do not have to be contiguous. So we broke this out into 2 areas. These areas were determined to be areas where there was both the potential for increment to be generated, but then also opportunities for tax TERS revenue to be spent to spur future development. So area number 1, you can see there, I think we're in it right now. We're in area number 1 off of Oak Street and First. I kind of call it, in my mind, your downtown. I don't know if that's appropriate.
That's good, yes.
And then area number 2 is some vacant land that is poised for a multifamily project in just north of I-20. So if you'll go to that next slide, I think you can see. Scroll down. There you go. So there's area number 1. You can see it's pretty built out. Part of the reason, or the catalytic kind of project that's happening in area number 1 is just south of the railroad there. There is some opportunity for a medical complex, and I don't know, Mr. McGuire, if you want to speak on it, or.
Yeah, so this is the Callahan County Medical Clinic and their partners that bought the property. Their plans are expand their medical practice to bring in pharmacy and additional medical entities into the city, which I think we're all in agreement would benefit the city tremendously. So this was really the original ask of doing this, was to help support that growth. And then when I was having the discussions with Natalie and David, when I found out that we didn't need to be contiguous, Natalie and I had a long conversations, and by expanding this zone, it encompasses what's going on Oak Street with the rehabilitation of the buildings that are going on in Oak Street. So it gave us the ability to come all the way up, capture the true downtown area, which I know is council priority to revitalize downtown. And this just becomes another mechanism with two people that are actively trying to develop downtown. It's going to give us the tools to help them. And again, just like in the first TERS, it's a catalyst event, and we are not necessarily going to have to try to fund infrastructure like we've been doing to grow the city.
We can go through that next slide pretty quick because it's not as interesting. It's a vacant land site.
So
But, go ahead.
this is the parcel of land where the apartment complex is going to go, and the same developer wants to do retail space on the remaining property. So again, this was something that they were waiting to see what the city was going to move on. There's some challenges with this property with TxDOT on entering in and out of the property off the access road. So one of the workaround solutions for that was if we put a road that connects the access road to County Road 120 and we split the property, that's something that gives us the ability that TxDOT will approve. And again, we're not bearing the burden of trying to put another road in. The developer knows that a TERS is going to go into place, and then once the projects go vertical, he'll ask for reimbursement back on the infrastructure piece.
And this is a kind of a classic example of do something or do nothing. And if you do nothing, I can almost guarantee that the site will remain as is, right? And if you do something and give 75% to the TIF fund, and again, I think it's just really critical to understand that nothing is by right. So you have that discretion. So let's just say that the road property comes in and it really only needs 50% of the increment generated from the multifamily project to pay the road. That's all you have to pledge. You don't have to pledge the full 75% to reimburse them. You can do 50%, or you might want to do 75% for a shorter amount of time. Or you might want to do 75% for a longer amount of time and give yourself that extra 25% to just have in the TERS fund to then redirect to a project down here on Oak Street. You know, there's lots of ways to get creative, but it just gives you that tool and that ability to make those types of decisions and to have that discretion. So in total, area 1 and 2 is approximately 42 acres. This TERS is wholly within the city of Crandall. Again, with the oh my gosh, what am I saying? I'm sorry about that typo. We do work in the city of Crandall too, which is out in Kaufman County. Sorry about that. The purpose of the TERS is to encourage private development that will yield additional tax revenue to all taxing jurisdictions. So again, working with Mr. McGuire and understanding what the development community has already proposed, the anticipated development within this particular two areas, instead of being hotel and retail, we have multifamily, retail, and office. On the office, you will see that there is a lower Taxable value, again, that's just based on comps. The comp that I used for the medical was your Resource Care Community Health Center. It was built in 2011, but it came in at $101 per square foot. So that's where that 125, taking into account that it would be a newer property versus a 10-year-old property. Again, just trying to give you guys some context into how these numbers came about. For the multifamily, there's the Virtue on Denal in Abilene is an apartment complex that was built in 2021, and that came in at that $110,000 per multifamily unit. So you can see that a multifamily unit project at 200 units, $22 million. The previous project that we were looking at had 2 hotels, and that retail, and that was just about the same amount. So just kind of trying to understand just the impact that a multifamily project can have on your tax value in your community is really incredible. So we had about $25 million worth of taxable value. Again, in the next slide, similar to how the exercise that we did on the previous TERS, assuming 75% of the real property increment within the zone above that 2023 base for a 30-year term, that would be about $6 million in TERS participation. The city of Clyde, again, the figure there for total taxes generated takes into account real property, but it also takes into account that 1.75% of sales tax. So you're getting an additional benefit above and beyond just that 25% of the real property. You also get that additional sales tax that would be generated. That $6.1 million on the next slide is put into a menu of eligible project costs. Same categories. These are the categories that are allowed by statute. We don't want to try to rule anything out. We want to give you guys that flexibility as the TERS board and city council to say what's allowed by statute, and then the project comes forward, and then you decide, is this something that we want to reimburse or provide an incentive for. Same idea in terms of the cost being flexible and fluid. If you wanted to increase one of the line items to spend in the other, you would have the discretion to do that. Everything would have to be approved by the TERS board and city council by 2 separate actions. Similar timeline, we're looking at today for your consideration the creation ordinance for the TERS number 2 for the city of Clyde. The creation ordinance would establish the boundary, the term, the TERS board, proposing the same structure that the TERS board would be made up of city council members, city participation at that 75% of the real property. Coming back on July 11th, you would be seeing my counterpart David on that day. I will be in Mexico to hopefully approve the TERS, the plan by the TERS board, and then city council by a separate ordinance. So. Any questions?
Council have any questions for Natalie? Chris?
No, again, just like TERS number 1, this is a tool in the toolbox. It helps the city, it helps the Economic Development Corporation. It's a catalyst event. It's what developers have been looking for. And it fits nest into council's plans and the growth that you want to see, smart controlled growth. So my recommendation is that you approve.
Stanley, thank you so much for all the information. Appreciate it. All right, if council has no other questions or thoughts, then I would entertain a motion to approve the ordinance creating TERS zone number 2.
I have a thought, and
Yes.
we hear a lot about the tax, the benefit of the tax and the dollars. But not only is it dollar signs, it is the resources that it makes available for the people who live in our community. It is not just about the money. When I think about the medical complex and the young population that we have in our community and the elder population that we have in our community, to be able to have nearby services for healthcare provision is huge. Not every family has 2 vehicles. Not every family has 2 wage earners. Even it came to my mind recently about the Veterans Administration of the thought being we have enough providers in your area. Well, but where is our area? Is our Clyde veterans having to transport to Abilene for services, and what kind of hardship does that create for them when transportation is not available? I've been able just recently to take advantage of absolutely excellent healthcare provisions that are right here 5 blocks from my house. I can't tell you how much I value that, and I do have 2 cars, and we do have 2 incomes. I mean, see, that it's the thing that I always think about. If we can take those dollars and draw whatever we need to, put little hats on them, put hair on them, those dollar signs represent families, individual human beings. And we need to keep that in mind as we serve. And as you guys serve, there's lots of community servants in here. Housing, multifamily housing, nice housing benefits families. Hotel occupancy tax, the very first thing I ever learned about municipal funding was, oh my gosh, we need a hot tax, and we didn't have one. We still don't have one, but we're working on it. So anyway, having said all that, I would like to make the motion that we adopt the ordinance for TERS 2 for downtown and the family, multifamily living area. And I don't know, that's off the books, but anyway.
I'd have a motion by Councilwoman Kaufman and seconded by Councilman White. All those in favor? That passed unanimously. Thank y'all very much for that. Okay, moving on to 8.4. This is to consider and act upon approving a rezone for property located at being 13.14 acres, abstract 86, section 65 BBB and C, or 1300 Ross Road. Mr. McGuire?
So this rezone will allow the property to come from agricultural to single-family estate, which gets to our housing priorities and the need for more housing. It nests completely inside council's vision and plans. So the staff's recommendation is that you approve this rezone.
And this is one of the projects that we've been working on for a while. This has come before council before, so this is just for council to, if they choose so, to rezone the property. So council have any questions or thoughts?
So just to be clear, this is this one right here, right? Or is
That is the one that, yeah, and that's the one that we're changing to 200 Pleasant Lane,
So
so.
200 Pleasant Lane's the top one, because it's on another page here.
No, this one's the 1300.
This one's 200 Pleasant.
One of them zoomed in closer than the other.
This one's 200 Pleasant. Right.
This is all agriculture now, so it's gotta be something
Right.
that can.
But this one 8.4 is for this one, or this
He's just
one?
looking for clarification of which one's gonna be 200 Pleasant.
Okay. Okay.
Is that anything that we need to,
The other one is the 1300.
when we, as we
Just
do
sold
this,
property, so now it's
anything
all-
Right.
needs to be noted that that's gonna be 200 Pleasant, or are we still just operating it just as 1300?
At 1300 Ross Road?
Yeah.
Yeah, so
So as it is right now, this is what we're operating on, so that,
Yes.
even what Terry said about it changing, the
Yeah, that's
legislator doesn't
when
affect
it
this.
was, no.
Okay, just wanna
When
make
this
sure.
was done and all the letters were sent out and everything, it's 300,
Right.
1300 Ross Road, yeah.
Okay, very good. The council have any other thoughts on that? Any other questions for either Terry or Chris? Okay, then I would entertain a motion to approve the rezone.
I'll make the motion to rezone.
I have a motion by Councilman White, seconded by Councilman Rector to rezone the property at 1300 Ross Road. All those in favor? Passed unanimously, thank you. 8.5 is to consider and act upon approving a rezone for property located at 204, 206, 208, 210, and 212 Marlin Street from single-family estate to multifamily, so a triplex can be placed on each property. Again, this is a piece of property that's been in the works for a little while that we've been down there on Marlin and they're working on, so council have any thoughts or questions about Marlin Street addresses?
This is on the opposite side of the other one that's being built, right?
Yeah, at the end of Marlin, down there where it ties into, close to, North First.
They built a new house right there
Out there on the corner.
Is on the corner.
Past that.
202.
And this gets specifically to what
Yeah,
Councilwoman
definitely.
Coppin just said about multifamily development and the need, beyond the need for homeowner properties,
So
there's a need for rental properties as well. And this serves a
Quality.
completely underserved market that we desperately need more rental properties available.
Yeah.
So this would pretty much make like 15 rental properties of good quality.
Yes.
That area right there. All right, council have any other questions? If not, I'd entertain a motion to rezone the property from single-family estate to multifamily.
Make a motion.
I have a motion by Councilman White, seconded by Councilman McGuire. All those in favor? That passes unanimously, thank you. 8.6, this is to consider an act upon approving a rezone for property located at being 16.51 acres, abstract 86, section 65 B, B, and C, or 1300 Ross Road, from agricultural to single-family estate.
So, Council, Mr. Mayor, this is the remaining parcel of the overall acreage that, and this will allow for construction of homes.
Again, this is one of the things that council's been looking at for a little while now, that we've been discussing, talking about. Does council have any questions concerning this rezone? Seeing none, I will consider a motion to approve the rezoning of 1300 Ross from agricultural to single-family estate.
Make a motion, we rezone the property.
That's a motion by Councilman McGuire, seconded by Councilman Rector. All those in favor? Passed unanimously, thank y'all. 8.7, consider an act upon approving a preliminary replat of property located at being lots 5 and 6, block 50, original town site, Clyde, Callahan County, Texas. The request is to replat into 3 lots so houses can be constructed on each lot. Again, this is that area of Bowie and South Fifth Street. Council have any thoughts or questions? You have a map there, vision of it.
This vision of it, is this the proposal? Okay.
This.
1, 2, 3.
Sorry.
It's okay.
The one that is there, currently, if you, it's there, there's a, this is where the original house was, so there's actually a lot already laid out here. There's plenty of room right here for another one, and then there's quite a large area right here for a third one, so.
Okay.
This one will be facing out to Southfield there.
Okay.
And these two out to Bowie Street.
And then the street that's gonna be closed, or is this in the same vicinity?
That's not that one.
Okay,
No,
all right.
no, no.
Erase.
Okay, no problem. Yeah, see, y'all got it there?
We're good.
So
Okay.
again, this gets to your vision. These 3 homes that are being proposed will be affordable housing, not Section 8 housing, but affordable housing, which gets to another one of your priorities of having more affordable options for either for rent or for purchase.
Council have any other questions for Mr. McGuire? If not, I'd entertain a motion to approve the preliminary replat.
I'll make a motion.
Second.
I have a motion by Councilman White, seconded by Councilwoman Kaufman to approve the replat. All those in favor? Passes unanimously. Thank you. 8.8, this is consider and act upon approving a rezone for property located at lots 3 and 4, block Rolling Acres, which is actually 408 Oriole, Clyde County, Texas. The request is for a rezone of property to manufactured home district, so a manufactured home can be placed on the property. Is currently zoned as single family 2. Mr. McGuire?
So this parcel is in a neighborhood that already has manufactured homes. It's this one parcel that is still single family too. So approving manufactured homes would fit inside what's on that current street. So the recommendation from community development and from staff is that you go ahead and approve, approve this rezone. And that'll add another residence to the city of Clyde.
Does that have to be a new,
6 year or newer.
Yeah, it'll fit,
New one.
it'll fall within the ordinance.
fall in our
of
ordinance
what we
of
have
6 years or newer.
established.
exactly, okay.
Other questions? Council have other questions? All right, then I would entertain a motion to approve the rezone to manufactured home district.
Make the motion, we approve the rezone.
Have a motion by Councilman McGuire, seconded by Councilman Rector to approve the rezoning. All those in favor? That passes unanimously. Thank y'all. Moving on to 8.9, consider and act upon approving an ordinance of the City of Clyde, Texas, closing a 2,796 square foot portion of South Fifth Street, finding that the portion to be closed is not necessary for use as a public thoroughfare, authorizing conveyance of said property, providing savings and severability clauses, and providing an effective date. Mr. McGuire?
So, Mr. Mayor, Council, we're not closing a street. It's the way the verbiage is written, it's legalese. This home is under contract. It can't close when the survey was done. When this house was built roughly 50, 60 years ago, it is encroached. The 30-foot of the house actually sits inside the city's utility easement. So all the city's doing is abandoning 30 feet of its easement, which impacts nothing with the road and it impacts nothing with our utilities inside the easement. If we don't do this, there is no way for this real estate transaction to close, and it's at no fault of the homeowner that's trying to sell or the purchaser that's trying to buy the property. We've run into these issues before, and council's approved where we've abandoned some easement space. So our recommendation is that you approve this ordinance so this real estate transaction can close.
Council have any thoughts or questions?
Another thought, same thought, different situation. It's for the benefit of the people, for the buyer and the seller. And so I move that we adopt the ordinance to allow for the abandonment of the easement.
Second.
I have a motion by Councilwoman Kaufman, seconded by Councilman White to approve the ordinance. All those in favor? Passed unanimously. Thank you very much. Hold on. That's where we already went to. So moving on to 8.13 at this point, this is to consider and act upon awarding the Texas Department of Agricultural Community Development block grant from bids received. Mr. McGuire?
So, Mr. Mayor, Council, citizens, we applied for and were approved for a community development block grant. This will allow us to replace aging sewer lines in that very same neighborhood, one of the older neighborhoods in the city. Economically underserved, we met all the criteria. The project's been bid out. We received the bids. Ken Martin was here. We did the bid reviews. So this is the last piece for you to approve the contract. and we will begin that project immediately. It's roughly 1,800 linear feet of sewer line that will be replaced.
Council have any thoughts or questions for Mr. McGuire concerning this?
I'm just curious, how many months has this been in the works?
This has been from the start of the grant application to now has been 18 months, roughly 18 months. It's been a very long project, a lot of hurdles and qualifications to be able to do. Again, this is a win for the city. This is $350,000 of grant money that the city does not have to pay back, that we can enhance infrastructure.
So talk to us about the alternate bids as far as water lines and all that.
So when we originally scoped out the project, we had a wish list to do sewer, to do water, to do a number of, to expand the improvement zone. Unfortunately, with the cost of labor, inflation, and materials, other than the city willing to come up with an additional $300,000 that we just don't have, we're going to award the base bid and not any of the options. Because the total, the city would have to come up with an additional $500,000.
Council have any other questions or thoughts? If not, I'd entertain a motion to award the grant to the bid received.
I'll make a motion.
A second.
Have a motion by Councilman White, seconded by Councilman McGuire to approve the bid, to approve the grant. All those in favor? That passes unanimously. Thank you. 8.14, consider an act upon approving setting up 2 new accounts for the 2023 certificates of obligation funds and the payments. Mr. McGuire?
So in discussion with our auditor and with the tax accountants, and the tax lawyers, for accounting purposes and for audit purposes, some of the bond money is going to be infrastructure related, water sewer related. Some of it is equipment. So the recommendation was, instead of depositing all the money into one general fund account and then having not a clean audit trail on the back end, it was easier to establish 2 separate accounts so that the money can be deposited in. The expenses that are paid will be paid appropriately, coded appropriately, and it just keeps the accounting clean.
One
and the
account
audit
will
clean.
be for the money we receive, and one account will be for the bond payment we make. Because when we get our tax money, our INS money and all that, not that we're, any overage of money we pull aside and set aside to make these bond payments. So I need a separate account to make the payments out of for a clean audit trail, so he can see where the money came from and where we paid it. And then the other account is actually for the money we receive.
Very good.
Does that make sense?
So the money we receive, you're gonna say we're gonna buy the paving machine, you're gonna write a check out of it to buy the equipment.
That's correct.
And then you're gonna have a separate account for money
The interest and sinking
and
account.
all that to make the payment for the bond.
That's correct.
It's all audit
Yeah, it's all about the audit trail for Cameron.
and tax accounting.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Very good. Council have any other thoughts or questions concerning the 2 accounts? If not, I'd entertain a motion to approve setting up the 2 new accounts for the certificate of obligation funds and payments.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
I have a motion by Councilman White, seconded by Councilwoman Kaufman to set up the 2 accounts. All those in favor? That passes unanimously. I don't believe we have executive session, so we will move past 9.0. We will not adjourn into executive session tonight. That means that we will move on to 10.0. This is an opportunity for our financial statements. Council's had the opportunity to look these over. Do you have any questions concerning your financial statements? Yes? Okay. He has a question, but he's gotta find his question.
Find it.
Which department?
I don't know. Give me a minute.
Okay.
Really no hurry.
Hour ahead of schedule right now for what we've done. So no, this works.
Hold on. Oh. What is, the clearing account?
Okay, that's a real good question. Basically, the city is run from two different accounts. You have your general account and your enterprise account. Your general account is like your police department, your street, your administration. Your enterprise account is like your water and sewer, okay, sanitation. So, like when I do payroll or we pay AP, we don't actually write a check out of general or enterprise because they could buy something on one ticket that something goes to streets and something goes to water. Well, that's actually two different funds. So as Naomi enters her AP or as I enter salaries that are split between departments, like Chris and mine's salary is split between enterprise and general because we do stuff for water and sewer and for administration. Basically what it does is when we input it in the system and break it out in the system, it charges enterprise what should be charged and it charges general what should be charged. But so you don't cut one check from each one, so you cut one check to that vendor and it clears through that clearing account.
Yeah, because I was noticing that there was,
Yeah, it's your AP, it's your payroll, it's things like that, but instead of having to cut 55 checks from enterprise and 100 checks from general, you just cut, one check and it separates it in the system.
oh, it makes sense. I just didn't, I just didn't ever recall
It's a good
seeing
question.
that. Yeah.
That's the only thing it's used for is to clear checks.
Great.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Any other questions on your financial statements? If not, I'd entertain a motion for adjournment.
I'll make that motion. I'll second.
A motion by Councilman White, seconded by Councilman McGuire to adjourn. All those in favor?
Aye.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, thank y'all very much for being here tonight. We appreciate y'all and your interest in seeing how things are done. We hope that we haven't kept you too long, but we thank y'all. Come back.